Now, let's get started. My name is Lexi. I am Marketing Associate at CannDelta, and today we are talking about the green zone and cannabis marketing. The green zone is that tricky area retailers navigate to keep compliant with their marketing, but also generate a positive ROI for their business. This is hard to do, and you guys can talk it out in the comments. Because unregulated businesses, consumer businesses, can use whatever means necessary to market. It can be social media, in-person, loyalty, podcasts, exclusive deals, sales, so much more. Regulated retailers in Canada, especially in cannabis, have more considerations to make when marketing, and this is hard for small businesses. You know, there are risks and rewards to both sides. However, staying compliant and having a great return is possible with the right tools and guidance. So today we have two experienced and amazing minds in Canadian cannabis. First, we have Lucas McCain, who has been in the Canadian cannabis industry since the early 2010s. He's someone who has worked with Health Canada and many retailers to licensed producers to get set up compliantly and successfully. He has brought his wealth of knowledge with his partner to build a multi-million-dollar regulated substances consulting powerhouse, and that's CannDelta. Next, we have Patrick O'Callaghan. He is the marketing machine behind Springbig's Canadian force that helps retailers both enterprise all the way down to mom and pop, small retail operations succeed on regulated terms. With over a decade of consumer experience and legal knowledge, he has helped grow Springbig's clientele, but he's also helped Springbig's clientele build success for themselves while marketing in that green zone. So welcome both of you for joining. How are you guys doing today?
Hey, thanks for having us. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I feel great.
Awesome.
Thanks as well.
Good to see
Appreciate
you, Patrick.
It, Lexi. Good to see you as well, Lucas.
Well, I mean, Canadian retailers are faced with so many obstacles in getting their store advertised and marketed. The Cannabis Act, Bill C-45, Castle, consumer privacy, all of this affects what they can and can't do. So before we talk about how they can tackle strategies, let's talk about the why. Lucas, why don't you guide me a little bit about yourself, CannDelta, but tell me why these regulations exist, how, and really how Health Canada came to deciding and enacting these regulations for businesses.
There's a couple parts to this. You had mentioned before that it's very difficult. It is very challenging. There are a lot of folks that are trying to understand why things are the way they are, and even many of the experts are still debating as to what's technically sort of permitted and allowed, especially as it pertains to marketing, advertising, and promotion in the world of cannabis. So with Bill C-45, that's a federal act. The Cannabis Act also contains its corresponding cannabis regulations. That's something that went into royal assent in 2018. That act is the overarching umbrella that everything has to sort of fit inside, and each province will have its own regulatory framework as it pertains to cannabis retail, licensing, audits, and also their own individual licensing act for those retail stores that have their own standards on, for example, advertising, promotion, and marketing as well. So jumping in, I'll share my screen here. So we're with CannDelta. Hopefully we can see the right screen here. So we have a strong focus in licensing, compliance, and operations support. We've actually helped license over 10% of the cannabis Ontario cannabis retail stores, and many more across the country as well. And just sort of where I'm speaking from, if you're interested about my background, I'm the CSO of CannDelta. I was at Health Canada prior to this in the health products branch in regulatory operations and enforcement, or ROBE. I have a PhD in synthetic chemistry, and moving into cannabis was a natural move for me, as there was a lot of synchronicity there as well. So I specialize in a lot of the regulatory document writing and advising on how to launch successful and compliant new businesses, particularly in retail. So we're a regulatory and scientific consulting firm. We were based in Toronto, but we work with clients across the globe. So we've got extensive backgrounds in regulatory and science. We have folks on our team, even myself excluded, that have worked at Health Canada, from food, pharma, and most importantly, the Canadian cannabis industry, whether that's retail or from patient educators, or even from the Federal Cannabis Agency as well, or federal cannabis producers, I should say. Okay, so the Cannabis Act under 2018, section 17.1. So this is going to get nice and thick and heavy right away. So here we've got a caricature of a sugar leaf here with a smiling face, and this sort of becomes, I think, very centric to a lot of the content that we'll be talking about. So under section 17, part 1, unless authorized in the Cannabis Act, it is prohibited to promote cannabis or a cannabis accessory or any service related to cannabis by communicating it, about its price or distribution, by doing so in a manner that there are reasonable grounds to believe that it could be appealing to young persons. And again, that's a really big one for Health Canada, is making sure that young people do not receive a bombardment of advertising and promotion for cannabis, cannabis accessories, or cannabis services such as retail. Okay, funny enough, conferences such as LIFT, which are happening in May, is by definition a non-compliance cannabis conference. Interestingly enough, though, Health Canada had a special endeavor to present at the LIFT conference to speak to the regulations and to compliance and enforcement actions as well. So when we're talking about a lot of the information that's going to be presented here, it's all going to be falling on a scale of risk. Some elements will be a higher risk, certainly. Others will be potentially lower. Something's a low risk. We're definitely not recommending that people sort of, use those sort of means to exploit what they can do in advertising and promotion. It's very important that you understand the risk and the consequence when again, breaking any of these rules or guides, we should say. So again, the means of depiction of a person, character, or animal. So again, here we've got a sugar leaf here. The sugar leaf is smiling. It's invoking a sense of positive emotion. So something like this on a bus bench would certainly be non-compliant, as a for instance. And any kind of emotion that it can include, for example, glamour, recreation, excitement, vitality, risk, or daring. A great parallel to this is looking at the tobacco industry. The tobacco industry, a lot of these regulations are pulled and distilled down directly from that industry, and we have seen a lot of changes in what has been permissible in tobacco compared to where we're at now with cannabis. A great example is, for example, that famous cowboy who used to smoke cigarettes there, invoking sort of this element of masculinity to try and draw upon new users for that particular product. Typically someone that would be, somewhat fit, and invoking this idea that there's a lifestyle associated with using that product. And all that is very non-compliant. Now we sort of zoom in, and I'll use Ontario specifically because it's the province with the highest population. But this is very similar across the board with all the other provinces, AGLC specifically in Alberta. But again, number one here is appeal to persons under the age of 19 or 18 in Alberta. That is something that they're very, very strict on. Promoting cannabis or accessories in a way that's false, misleading, or deceptive, saying that taking CBD, for instance, can help with arthritis is non-compliant. Saying that CBD can help you rest is non-compliant. Those are claims. Those are something that, for example, a bud tender would not be able to say in conversation because there's nothing to sort of back that up from a scientific perspective. It would need a drug identification number, a DIN. So any kind of leading a customer to that kind of product using that language wouldn't be allowed. You have to sort of be creative in sort of how you get the product, the right product to the right customer, right? Even though we know there's a lot of anecdotal evidence to suggest that CBD can help with a lot of ailments and potentially could help people fall asleep based on a lot of that information that gets circulated. Medicine, health, and pharmaceutical associations are not allowed. So if you look at all the cannabis retail stores, all the legal ones, they don't contain the word dispensary. They don't contain the word health, medicine. They can't use, for example, a green cross or a blue cross in their logo. They can't have any kind of relation to like sort of a pharmaceutical or an approved drug. Okay. Depict or suggest the illegal sale of cannabis. Okay. And then association of cannabis, for example, with an activity that would require a certain amount of skill, like operating a motor vehicle, forklift, and so on. Okay, all of those things are not permitted, right? So this only gets, again, sort of more strict and regulated as we move through, and we start talking about the topic of inducements. So inducements, from a sales and promotion literature perspective, anything that can persuade or influence, right? And that's very, very broad. So again, we can see why this is so challenging. Incentives to buy by offering an added value to a customer, those kinds of things are strictly forbidden and not permitted. Inducements designed to accelerate sales transactions are also not permitted. So for example, promotions such as coupons, price off deals, premiums, contest samples, trial offers, refunds, rebates, and frequency programs under the Act are technically not allowed. But if we zoom in on sort of what some of this can mean, that can mean, for example, a great example is something that might be legal in the States in dispensaries versus in Canada is, come in for 50% off on your birthday, or St. Patrick's Day promotion on all dried flower products. Those kinds of promotions are strictly forbidden because they have sort of a time limited factor on them and have the potential to get folks to purchase more than what they normally would. So forbidden under the Cannabis Act and also under the Cannabis License Act for the AGCO. Okay, so the Cannabis Act does not define inducements, but does define promotion. So in respect of a thing or service means to make for the purpose of selling the thing or service a representation other than the representation on the package or label, but whether the thing, service by any means, directly or indirectly, can influence or shape attitudes, beliefs, behaviors about that thing or service. Again, sounds pretty broad, but basically saying that you can't promote something because it's going to make you feel happy or euphoric. And how a lot of licensed producers have gotten around that is launching brands that are specifically called, for instance, Euphoria, or nighttime, right? So there are some sort of clever ways to sort of get around this, and Health Canada has let a lot of that potentially slide because, for example, if those were names that were used in legacy that have been brought to the regulatory framework, Health Canada has been somewhat lenient on maintaining some of that, let's call it institutional knowledge or memory that comes from the legacy market. So those are some of the ways that LPs have gotten around some of the branding and labeling. And then Health Canada has an information bulletin last or 2 years ago that noted that a person that sells cannabis or accessories, so that would be, for example, the retail store operator, must not provide inducements that encourage non-users to begin using cannabis or that might encourage excessive or heavy consumption. Okay, so moving forward, again, we're seeing that there's I guess sort of melding of the two sets. So we've got our federal set, and again, we've got our provincial set as well. And it's important to always recognize that even at the provincial level, that there is that overarching Cannabis Act that again does control a lot of what can be done in terms of inducements, as for instance. So going more into section 17, part 1, the point of sale. So this again speaks specifically to cannabis retail. Cannabis and cannabis accessories subject to the regulations. A person that is authorized to sell cannabis or cannabis accessories may promote it at the point of sale if the promotion only indicates its availability or its price or both of those things. Meaning you can say at the point of sale, there is this product going for this amount. Where that steps over into the point that's sort of in the gray area or even in the non-compliance area is if you say that it's for a limited time only. So advertising at the till is certainly permitted. You can certainly have advertising also within the store and almost sort of push the boundaries of a lot of these rules in terms of promotion, advertising, and marketing if you're within the confines of an area that is age gated. And that could be, for example, certain websites that have to check ID. Maybe you need a credit card to register, or a bar. They card at the door and they're checking identification. There we'll typically see cannabis advertisements in such a way that we wouldn't normally see outside of that age-gated space. Okay, and that's permitted. There were, I think, a few campaigns with retail store franchises in which they were promoting via Snapchat, but they were able to do so because Snapchat had a way of age gating its users.
So as long as it's in store, or as long as there is a certainty that it is age gated, that's okay, but you cannot do limited time only. So something like Chris said about a raffle for swag, if it's in the store, it's okay. Advertising it is more of a gray area.
Yeah, again, even that can be, we can go a little bit more granular on that. So if for example, The raffle itself could be advertised. I mean, I think that's probably going to be very low risk to advertise because it's not talking about a cannabis product or an accessory or a service. Okay, maybe it's talking about a raffle for a T-shirt or a trip, but you might need to be maybe the age of majority to enter. Now, sort of where that would go immediately non-compliant is if a purchase was required. So these kinds of contests or free things that we give away at the till, such as maybe T-shirts or hats, all that's fine as long as you don't need to buy something to participate. That would be considered an inducement and would be non-compliant.
Okay, great. Continue. Sorry to interrupt.
No worries. Great questions. All right. So under the Cannabis Act 24, Part 1, unless authorized under this act, it is prohibited for a person that sells cannabis, again, retailers, to provide or offer cannabis without monetary compensation. So you have to pay for the product that you get. Now, we recently saw the inducement standards in Ontario change, okay, with the AGCO saying that it's okay for LPs to give free product to bud tenders. So again, important to make that distinction, but for any patrons that come into the store, they have to pay something. So you can't have a sale where it's buy 9, get the 10th one for free. You could do buy 10, pay the price of 9, right? Because in the second case, you're actually paying an amount for each product. Okay, even if that amount is as low as 1 cent, that's fine. You can't give away anything for free. Okay, so going on, Part B, to provide or offer to provide anything that is not a cannabis or accessory, including a right to participate in a game, right? If inducement for the purchase of cannabis. So again, making a purchase necessary, to provide or offer to provide any service, if it is provided or offered, or to be provided as an inducement for the purchase of an accessory. So again, you can't make things, you can't make your participation a function of having to buy something from that retailer. Okay, so again, we talked here a little bit about free samples. So free samples need to make the distinction between swag, like swag we can give away at a counter, such as bud tenders can give away swag to its patrons. LPs can give swag to bud tenders, okay? But free samples such as products are forbidden from the bud tender to patron level. Okay, under loyalty programs here, and this is November 2020, benefits to members of a loyalty program cannot be provided as an inducement. That can be gifts and contests under that loyalty program or delivery service under that loyalty program. Okay, and to close, licensees may not provide cannabis or accessories free of charge or provide any other thing or benefit as an inducement for the purchase of cannabis or accessories. Okay, may not accept or request material inducements. So this means that if you are a bud tender or a store operator, you can't request products, for example, from a licensed producer. However, LPs can decide to provide that to you. Okay. And then just sort of going on to, again, the time limited part. So Health Canada, if we say 25% off while supplies last, 25% off during the day of St. Patrick's Day, again, bringing in that sort of time limited factor, again, we'll enter the area of non-compliance. So that's important that we remove that from any kind of advertising and promotion. Okay, even though it might be true, you might not have all of those supplies left and you're a retailer trying to clear out some old inventory. You have to be very careful how that's advertised, even if it's at the till. Okay. And then just lastly, talking about compliance and enforcement actions. This was a tweet that I pulled up. I removed the originator of the tweet as well as the retail operator that was in question. And this was from the AGLC, so a store in Calgary, Alberta, in which they were using car wraps to drive around the city and promote their brand, which was the retail store. They were slapped with a $10,000 fine. The AGLC is very, very pro compliance and enforcement action. So if you're in Alberta, and I think I even saw something that popped up in the chat here about something about a discount for LP products for a time limited, duration, then that is definitely going to be something that's non-compliant. So please be very careful about how you advertise that. So just to wrap up here, our team's going to be on the road. We'll be at the LIFT Conference LCBC and Expo, which is May 12th to 15th. So that's my spiel. I'll hand it back over to you, Lexi.
Thank you, Lucas. And that was a great 101 on everything to do with cannabis regulations, which I know a lot of small businesses may know of, but not have time to read. Patrick, you're on the retailer side of things. We now know the regulations, but what is the true impact of business? from these regulations and trying to be compliant every day?
One of the biggest, I'd say, hurdles that retailers face is finding that compliant age-gated vehicle to enable their marketing campaigns in a manner that also tracks the success of those campaigns. So people throwing out these social media campaigns on Instagram and paying X amount of hundreds of dollars to get those in front of cannabis users local to their area aren't exactly tracking conversions through their point of sale. So you can just be spending money and not exactly generating a return on ad spend, and understanding whether your campaigns are truly driving in revenue or not. Again, physical restrictions, some of the most burdensome things. People can't even look into your store. You can't have anybody under the age of 19 even accompany an adult into the store. So I think marketing and advertising regulations are just much too stringent. If you go to the LCBO, which has much more relaxed environment, you can bring your family in. They have print magazines distributed all over the place. I think that cannabis and the stigma around it just needs a little more push from advocacy groups and your local MPs to just kind of get that ball rolling in terms of the changes we need to the regulations to allow these smaller mom and pop retailers the ability to market as if they were, let's not say a normal retailer, but a retailer that is regulated, just not as regulated.
Now, I want to pass this over to Lucas and ask, does Health Canada or the Ontario LCBO and Cannabis Board recognize these things, recognize these pressures, and do they take that into consideration when reviewing or thinking about a next legislation to come out for marketing and advertisement, or are they very strict and want to keep the status quo?
Yeah, so Health Canada is not going to be very flexible when it comes to their regulations. Having said that, we've mentioned that under Health Canada compliance and enforcement for advertising and promotion, that those kind of more risque moves are probably less of a concern from Health Canada's side. But from, again, those provincial regulators that are already doing gaming, for instance, and liquor, they keep very watchful eye over their cannabis retail stores that are in their area. So they're at much higher risk of handing out compliance and enforcement actions, such as verbal warnings, fines, and in some cases, even suspension or revocation of licenses. They are very attentive and empathetic to what small businesses are going through. And that includes retail operators. We have seen them host public consultation and even suggest changes to the registrar standards. We saw this in Ontario as it pertained to, for example, retail operators being able to produce and have white labeled products with their branding and store elements for sale in their store. The AGCO prevented that in these proposed sets of standards, and then 2 weeks later, after the public industry outcry from both LPs and retail stores, they actually reversed that decision. So the AGCO has been very public and I think empathetic about working with small business to ensure that they're looking out for them and allow them to largely sort of self-regulate without giving them prescriptive ideas on how to, for example, set up their store. A great example of that is like the frosted windows, right? We see frosted windows everywhere. That's really just neighbors looking at each other and saying, well, they're doing it, so I should. But there's nothing in the Cannabis License Act that prevents you from having clear glass windows that see right into the back of your store. But that's what the industry has sort of been self-guiding and directing into as a direction.
See, I always thought it was a regulation that's why you need frosted windows, but I guess it just looks cool. So
in Alberta, yes, it is. And I think when you're setting up a store, it's probably easier to see what your neighbors are doing to ensure that you don't necessarily have to put in the work and look through the regulations yourself. But now there's a big movement about removing that restriction because of all the robberies that have been happening in the Calgary and Edmonton area, and when these folks are coming into stores, no one from the outside can see what's happening on the inside. So,
oh dear. Well, I mean, Patrick, I'd love to know in your work and research, what is the number one thing that retailers have the hardest time with when marketing or advertising their store?
I'd say most retailers kind of have like a shotgun approach into their marketing mediums and avenues. So they're going to have a social media, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn campaign. They're also going to do some in-store promotions and stuff like that. But none of these real metrics, none of these real mediums really provide metrics on return on ad spend, right? So you really want to know if you're getting money for your advertising dollars. And one of the ways to do that is through like compliant SMS messaging, where the customer enrolls. But I'd say one of the biggest hurdles to a system like that is getting your customers to enroll. Most people, after a transaction, the first thing they're not looking to hear is, can I get your phone number? Usually when we go to the Gap or Old Navy, that usually follows me buying a pair of jeans. Yep, I've never responded to a deal or a discount that's come through email on that. So these programs on their own don't really drive in what you're looking for, but with certain tweaks, AI, and a little bit of targeted segmentation, you can get really granular with your list and sort of control your messages to the people who are going to be most respondent and engaging with those messages. So I'd say one of the biggest hurdles is getting consumers into your database, but Springbay provides about 6 different compliant methods for enrollment that just helps that pain point. And one of the best ways, again, to just get people into your program is to incentivize entry into your program, which we can touch on later through the compliant versions of loyalty programs that you can do in Canada in certain
Absolutely. And just to remind everybody, please send your questions in the chat or the Q&A. We'll get to them after the presentation, so you're going to just have to hang on tight. But I have one more question for you both. And, regardless of these complications, of the risks to these businesses, why do you think retailers still go ahead with these obvious loyalty programs and social media promotions, regardless if they're not compliant?
Well, I mean, I guess it draws upon a bigger issue for operators, and I'll pass it on to Patrick because I'm sure he's got a wealth of knowledge on it. But there's so little that retail operators can do to differentiate themselves. You can't, for example, sell products that are exclusive to that particular store. Everyone's drawing on the same product. One of the ways that you can do it, and probably the only way and maybe best way, is besides location, is creating a store experience inside the confines of your 4 walls and your roof that is unparalleled compared to the other stores. Unfortunately, a very expensive way to do it is to always carry all brands and SKUs so that your availability is high. I mean, that's a way to differentiate yourselves. Or like the sip and smoke down on I think it's Dundas, where they have, for example, they're catering to a specific audience, and those are the folks going to Trinity Bellwoods that are looking for beverages or pre-rolls. Having sort of those kinds of themes are interesting ways to differentiate yourself. But for example, some of the other ways are it's very, very difficult, right? And still the experts disagree on a lot of the things that are technically allowed.
Patrick, do you have anything to add?
Absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, there's like 4 or 5 main ways you can compete as a cannabis retailer. Price, probably one of the most unsuccessful strategies of all time.
The race to the bottom.
Exactly. Race to the bottom economics. Who wins? Nobody. Maybe the government. But all in all, these big chains like Value Buds are going to come in. They're going to push their lower percentage margins. They're going to instill a war of attrition until you can no longer afford to run your business profitably. So I believe there was a quote from High Tide that says, "We no longer do scouting for locations. People have done it for us. We push in around them and absorb their licenses." So it's very interesting to see. Price is something you would never want to compete on. A catalog of product, again, very hard to compete on because everybody's ordering from the same government source. So it's very, very difficult to understand what your local cannabis market needs without the analytics to understand that. Another one to compete on is in-store experience, but expanding on that is creating a bigger digital presence. Like one of the most One of the most revenue generating pieces of your tech stack is going to be your e-commerce provider. They're the stickiest solution. They're the most convenient. They incorporate delivery and really alleviate a lot of the problems or pain points of buying cannabis for the end consumer. So I think there's a lot can be said in terms of competing, but experience, both digitally and physically, pricing, stay away from, and then differentiating yourself through digital experience. So having like these compliant SMS campaigns to follow up, thank your customers for shopping with you, understand their purchase behavior once they're in the system, and then sort of tailor your product catalog to what your local market is kind of looking for more. So you can apply like multiple different economic rules, but Pareto's principle is usually the most common one. 80-20, 20% of your products are generating 80% of your revenue. So you should really look at seasonal product catalogs, why you should be stocking maybe more beverages in the warmer months. And then we have some new product categories like THC hot chocolate coming out that are going to be more relevant to the winter months. So it's all about understanding what your cannabis market wants from you. And there's multiple ways you can kind of understand and dive and chop up that sales data.
Hey, that's
Yeah.
great, Patrick. Just to jump in there and piggyback on that. Again, the in-store experience, I think, is the only way that you can really truly be unparalleled. And that includes, for example, qualifying your customer and getting a sense of what journey they need to be on. If someone's coming in for a pre-roll product, maybe there's an opportunity there to get them rolling trays or a bong, a dab rig, and they just know pre-rolls because that's easy. So sort of building an experience around, when your customers are coming in, I think will help to sort of regenerate that increased retention of clients, increased basket size for sure, but also I think helps to really get to know who your client is. Another one that I've seen has been allowed, but I've seen very, very few cases of this, is hosting events inside your cannabis retail store. That's one that I think is a great way to create awareness about the brands that are being featured and about your brand as well. Examples could include, for example, like cooking classes. You could have cooking classes there, live DJ appearances, right? And there's really no reason why a cannabis retail store can't operate in some respects like an event center or almost a nightclub, barring the fact that you can't serve beverages and pour them on ice. You can give beverages to patrons and they can enjoy them there. And if you were to team that up with, for example, a cannabis research sensory license, potentially you'd have a space where you could have people coming together, trying products that are on site as registered participants in a research project, which is a Health Canada license, by the way. And you're not necessarily a consumption lounge, but you are collecting data for the purposes of research, which can then be sold again back to LPs, which is another revenue generating model that is permissible, even explicitly under the AGCO's license standards.
And behavior with consumers, I mean, it is human behavior. The closer you are together to have that type of community in store causes more of that trust, so that each time that person's coming in, they're going to spend some money, but they're spending money because they want to enhance the store and enhance the community, which is why when I was speaking with so many of the small businesses before this webinar, I mean, that was the number one goal. Is these were people who had 1 to 5 employees each, and it was bubbly, it was communicative, it was educational, but they also wanted to bring the community around it. It wasn't just a transactional relationship. It was an honest to goodness, almost familial relationship with the consumers coming in, so that they knew exactly what the ailments were, or they knew what they liked to feel, or even just who they are, so that they could connect the products better with the person instead of just pushing whatever the products are on the shelves. So, this is a good transition, as I'm handing it over to Patrick, who's going to very gratefully walk us through the Springbig platform and how retailers can compliantly make the most out of marketing, digital advertising, and loyalty, which I think is a great toolkit to have for smaller retailers. So Patrick, take it away.
So yeah, this is the Springbig communication engine where we do compliant, targeted SMS and loyalty programs that are based online in the cloud and accessible anywhere you can access the internet. The way we do our programs and make them compliant is there's just a few things to note here. So like Castle covers our communication legislation, requires consent directly or implied from the consumer to receive SMS communication campaigns. So implied consent means they can make a purchase at your point of sale. Would you like to be in our VIP program? And if they verbalize yes, that technically counts as implied consent. Loyalty programs are only permissible everywhere outside of British Columbia and the Yukon territories where their provincial legislation completely bars it. There's no subjective wording, no loyalty programs whatsoever. So unfortunately for BC and Yukon territories, I apologize if you're on the call today, but we can't do anything there as of yet. Again, you can reach out to any advocacy groups or your government representative and sort of give them a little nudge. But everywhere else, outside of BC and the Yukon territories, can do loyalty programs just on a points per visit basis. So a visit purchases must not be required to earn points, and the redeemables from those loyalty programs can't be redeemed for cannabis and only redeemed for non-cannabis accessories. So like swag, your ancillary products, your rolling papers, your rolling trays, any of those things can be rewarded through loyalty points generated this way. And a unique example is a retailer in Western Canada decided that instead of giving out swag and papers and rolling trays, for every 100 points generated from visits, they would pay to plant a tree. So it was more of an ecological loyalty program, and it did very well and had a great feedback from community for taking an initiative like that. So Springbig starts really with onboarding your customer. We need to consent to send them these messages. You can't just buy lists of cannabis consumers and then punch them into Springbig. You need to have them enrolled. So we have about 26 different integrations across point of sale providers as well as e-com providers in North America. Some of the most prevalent ones in Canada: Cova, Greenline, and Dutchy for e-commerce. These things you'll be able to sign up for right through those platforms and our integrations. If we aren't integrated with your POS or e-com provider, these are the other ways we kind of enroll customers. So we white label website join forms. We have customizable apps on tablets, flyers, text to join codes, QR codes, and then tap to join right at the POS. And this is basically how the customer journeys through Springbig from sign up until they hit certain milestones for visits. So a new customer joins, you can set up automated messaging campaigns that we like to call auto connects during certain milestones. Like for instance, the third milestone here, they've hit third visit, maybe purchased around $100 worth on their own volition. It's not a requirement. And maybe you want to reward them with something like a headband or something that's low cost, still keeps your margins high, and rewards the customer, providing an extra experience that differentiates you from a retailer down the street. So this is just a basic kind of overview of a new customer's journey through the Springbig platform. Once they become a VIP member, we have the statistics that show they visit more often, they spend more per visit, and refer more friends, and then redeem more offers. And I'll show you just exactly how we do that through the back end of the platform. So this here is our homepage for the back end of Springbig. Right away at the top, of course, just to note, this is a demonstration account, so we're not going to have actual customer data on here, complete mock. And right away at the top, we're going to notice some KPIs. So total visits, redemptions, spending total, average ticket per spend, net new members that we've enrolled into the program, either through those POS integrations or the other join methods, and then textable members. So Springbig actually filters out landlines, disconnected phone numbers, anything that will not receive the actual message to preserve your credits. This is also completely customizable on a date range. So if you want to see, you know, how well you're doing on the lead up to 420, how many points have been issued, how many texts have been sent, you can all see it from this nice kind of clean homepage. And then for our communication aspect of what Springbig does in Canada, there's two real facets. You have the auto connects, which are automatic trigger-based messages that happen when a customer engages over or clicks on a certain thing. So let's just briefly touch on the most popular ones that you can do compliantly in Canada. So this one here, daily deals, is probably the most obvious one here. We have an automated message that goes to a list based on their interests. So like, for instance, edible Mondays or munchy Mondays, flower Fridays. You can set up automated auto connects that go to only your flower shoppers, sending them first access to a deal that is available to everyone. It's just kind of like an advanced alert system that gets the message directly into their cell phone, tracks metrics like these on the campaign page here, which is like dates sent, how many SMSs were sent, clicks from those SMSs, visits from those SMSs, and then visitor spend from those visits. Now, this data is all pulled from point of sales and e-commerce providers when integrated. If you're not integrated, there is a little bit more work to do. And just returning to the auto connects to touch on the other two main ones that we see often are birthdays and win-backs. So birthdays, what you can't do, as mentioned previously, is give, you know, say a 50% off because it's just, you know, your birthday. What you can do is increase the amount of points they can generate for a visit on their birthday. They don't have to make a purchase. They can come in, they can register their visit, collect their points, maybe visit you back on a different day, make a purchase, and have some points accumulate a little faster as a reward for their birthday. Win back campaign, this is something that is for clients that are already in our database who we haven't seen in a while. So for instance, if Tom was a regular shopper and a value discount brand opened up down the street, we want to get Tom back shopping with us. So these are all automatic, and after Tom hits that 4-week trigger, a campaign will go out to him saying, Tom, we miss you. Here's some double loyalty points that you can earn towards our reduced sweater promotion. The other main thing that we really handle on Springbig's side that is a little more manual is the campaigns. So our campaigns here, this is just the dashboard I just briefly brushed over. So again, date sent, this is your campaign, clicks, visits, visitor spend. You have the ones that have been sent previously, and then you can schedule future campaigns. For instance, around 420, maybe you want to schedule a campaign leading up on the 19th. So let's go ahead and do that. So this is our campaign editor, where we're going to see all the segmentation that Springbig provides. So you can target by location, brand, category, even spending total, as long as they've been in the system that is integrated for a substantial amount of time, maybe 2 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, depending on their spending habits. And you could really dive down into the granularity of how you're targeting your customers. So we advise never blast your list. Obviously, it doesn't work well in marketing. We shouldn't be using it in cannabis marketing either. So maybe I have a location in downtown Toronto and I want to target Broken Coast Broken Coast shoppers who break a spending total of $500 to $1,000 per month. Now we're getting into very granular segmentation. Shoppers who frequent the downtown Toronto location, who frequent the brand Broken Coast, and who spend between $500 and $1,000 per month. We can come in here, add any image, demo account. So we got some interesting bees where we can fire in etc. Make up some kind of jargon there. You have the full emoji dashboard as well. And then here you can see how it's going to look on the consumer's phone. So at the top here, again, this is all just a demo account. You would have your own branding at the top, logos, social media links, your image, which could be anything from a new product you just launched to like maybe recently reduced or out of stock products to people who frequent these products regularly. So if I came in and bought Cold Creek Kush and found out it was out of stock, maybe you could avoid that negative experience by getting an automated auto connect out to them with an out of stock alert. So this button here also is a call to action where you can set up any sort of link. So that call to action shop online, we could come in here, call that e-commerce. For the sake of it, we'll go to springbig.com/e-commerce.
Patrick, I know Chris really wants to know, does Springbig integrate with Cova?
Yes. So we have a two-way integration with Cova. So we push and pull data from them. So it is probably one of our most advanced integrations that takes the most time off of your plate. And essentially, it'll all be real time. As these transactions come in, as these new customers come in, you'll be able to see that transactional data as well as all those KPIs on the homepage real time. Some of the other integrations, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just saying, I think Chris is very excited about that.
Okay.
And I hope other attendees are as well. I know Cova is a big partner, so.
Absolutely, yes. So that integration is rock solid, Chris. Great question. So yeah, you can add kind of any link here whatsoever, up to 25 links. We'll stick with one for now. And basically you can attach that to the call to action button, which could bring them directly into your e-commerce profile. So this is what we call the dashboard. One thing we need to consider is carrier filters. So Rogers, Talus, Bell, Fido, all the big ones, they have essentially buzzwords that they flag: cannabis, green, leaf. There's a list of maybe 400 or 500 slang jargon terms that these carrier filters look for. So the way around that is our dashboards are not visible to the carrier. And what happens is we set a template out that avoids any of those things, any of those buzzwords, anything that might get picked up and reduce your deliverability from the carrier's perspective. So these are all completely cleared templates. Of course, you can create your own, make your own. And what the customer is going to see is, don't worry, Michael, store like Trees is looking out for you this month. Come see what we have at store, with a link to the dashboard here, where they'll be able to send uncensored content.
Instead of having to learn algo speak, you can just let
Exactly.
Springbay do what it needs to do, and then get the information out a lot clearer and a lot faster too.
Absolutely. And then, of course, send now or send later, because we were going to set up a pre-420 campaign. We'll send it on Tuesday, maybe Tuesday after work, 6 p.m. would be a good time to do it. And that'll go out the day before with any of the promotions you're running for 420, just to get ahead of your competitors, make sure your consumers are aware that these deals are around and can plan their day around to shop with you.
That's fantastic. I mean, I just want to let everybody know we're coming up to about 10 minutes to the hour. So we definitely want to get to those questions that individuals have asked earlier on. Patrick, are you able to wrap up?
Yeah, absolutely. So one more thing I wanted to touch on is just this impact report. So the impact report is really where you're going to find out what is most successful in your marketing campaign strategy, what rewards are being redeemed the most, what categories of product are being purchased the most, what brands are being purchased the most, and which days of the week purchases are occurring and at what time during that day. So this report is very, very insightful for stocking yourselves with the right products, and also organizing your deal structure throughout the week based on the data you're pulling from this report.
No, that's a very powerful tool, and thank you for sharing. I hope all of our viewers have, gotten a little bit more educated on Springbig, but they also see the power that you have by using a product like Springbig in your toolkit to make marketing and loyalty a little bit easier. So, I mean, this is a great way to end our hour. Thank you so much for your company, for your questions, the lively discussion. Thank you to Lucas to lead on the regulations and compliance. Thank you to Patrick for leading us on the Springbig demo, but also speaking a little bit more about marketing and advertising for cannabis retail. Any additional questions for either team, you can reach out to patrick@springbig.com or lucas@CannDelta.com, who would be more than happy to help any of you. Thank you again, and watch out for the recording of this to go live on CannDelta and Springbig's YouTube, which again, hit the subscribe button when you can. But have a great day, everyone, and let's go market for this summer in a compliant but awesome way. Love to see and hear what you guys do. Thank you again.
Thanks.
And have a great day.